Well, for the second time in the last 4 days, we are looking at another hike in fuel prices. Top of the hour, let's begin with this breaking update. The news that is now coming across as far as the fuel prices hike that has now been seen, it is less than 1 rupee. And diesel in Delhi that has now been hiked to 91 rupees 0.58 paise per litre. Petrol prices will now amount to 98.64 rupees per litre. Now, this seems to be another hike that now is being recorded as far as when it comes to the first hike of petrol and diesel prices that saw around rupees 3. However, alongside when it comes to marginal softening in crude prices as well, it is being estimated when it comes to the residual under recovery is down from 10 to rupees 13 per litre. But this is now being said as far as the latest price increase is concerned, that is aimed at containing the incremental balance sheet stress rather than restoring market margins. But however, even when it comes to the government's policy that has been absorbing the cost, and however, it has now been reflecting in the prices there. So global crude oil prices that have surged beyond 50% because of the West Asia war and the consequent closure of the Strait of Hormuz that continues to remain blocked. But in a bid to insulate domestic consumers, the government-owned OMCs had not passed on when it comes to the higher rates for the retail petrol and diesel. In fact, in the last 4 years, petrol prices and diesel prices have not been hiked, although cut once. But this seems to be gathering pace with the government, and what is being said that an increase was necessary, and how the government has been making the people aware of what's been happening in the Middle East, which is beyond our control. But when it comes to certain austerity measures, when it comes to reducing fuel consumption, is something, a call that has been taken up by the Prime Minister, and it is also being received well on part of the Janta. However, this will add to only pressure on their wallets. However, it's a marginal hike, not even a rupee when we are looking at this hike that has now been reported. Let's in the meantime talk about when it comes to the city-wise breakup, how petrol and diesel prices are now going to look at, when it comes to your cities. So as far as when we talk about in Delhi, petrol prices is now nearing the 99 rupees per litre mark, and however, when it comes to in Kolkata, it has crossed 109 rupees per litre. In Mumbai as well, we are looking at the similar price at around 107 rupees per litre. In Chennai, the petrol rate is around 104.49 rupees per litre. And if we break down diesel prices as well, in Delhi, it will stand at around 91.58 rupees per litre. In Kolkata, diesel prices crosses 96 rupees. In Mumbai, it has now gone up to 94.08. Let's in the meantime connect with Mr. Sanjay Dua. He's joining us here. Ajay Dua, he's joining us here on the broadcast. Apologies, sir. But we talk about this latest price hike, sir. Would you call it nominal, or are we expecting series of small such hikes to happen in the near future, sir?
Thank you for having me in this discussion. The price increase has been inevitable, considering that for the last 10 weeks, almost 10 weeks after the war started, India had maintained the retail prices by requesting the oil marketing companies, largely government-owned, not to effect a price. They have reportedly been incurring a loss of 30,000 crore rupees a month, which is a staggering, if you would see, if over 2.5 months, they had to recover that price. The government did allow them to increase a few days ago by about 3.5 rupees, but that wasn't enough. And the fact of the matter is the war in Middle East doesn't seem to be ending. The Strait of Hormuz doesn't seem to be opening up. And one country amongst the larger ones which imports oil from through the Gulf of Red Sea, through the Persian Gulf, through the Oman Gulf and the Strait, is India. China has large amount of reserves, strategic reserves, enough to last it 7 months. We don't. And so the increase was inevitable. And I think if the war stays, this is not the last of the increases we are seeing.
Absolutely. And, when it comes to other hikes that are also expected, Mr. Rajiv Gupta is also connected with us. Sir, good morning. How are you looking at this? Another hike that has now been reported in the last 4 days, the second one that is being reported. Do you call it a nominal price hike? It is not even amounting to complete 1 rupee. But however, hike is a hike. It will add, and burden when it comes to the common man and his wallet.
Good morning. Thanks for having me with you. I think it's a nominal hike, and I have been saying this all along. If you really look at the percentage increase with both the hikes put together, it's hardly about maybe less than 5% or about 5%. If you look at all the other countries in the world, they have increased prices by 40 to 20% to 50, 60%. And it is something which is inevitable. It's something that you cannot control beyond a certain level. I mean, the government exchequer cannot take the burden of the rising fuel price which is happening. So, yes, I think it is something which is there on the cards. I fully agree to my previous this thing who was talking about that this may not be the last one. There could be even more of them if the situation does not improve. So actually the world is being held hostage, and everybody, everywhere in the world, people are facing this crisis. I think India is doing still out of all of them much better in terms of maneuvering the whole thing. And the recent visit to UAE, I think Prime Minister has also secured more LPG, more oil from UAE, which will be bypassing the Strait of Hormuz to ease the situation. But price hikes are still, we have to also understand one is price hike. The other is if you don't even have the oil, because if it doesn't come, you don't produce crude. Crude will have to come from somewhere. So I think India has diversified and tried to get oil from all different places. So I think still I would say that as a common person, we are getting all the things without any problem, of course, at a slightly higher price, which is something which is inevitable. One can't help it. Of course, it will bring in a little bit more of inflation. And all that we can hope is that the war situation improves. And once the war situation improves, even then I think it will take
some time to actually come back to normal. Yes, because that is a concern, sir, that has been growing. Thank you very much, Mr. Gupta, for your point of view. We also have Mitali Nikore, who's connected with us. Mitali, what is your opinion here? Because the key considerations were timing and the quantum, because it was being said that it is inevitable, that the price hike will happen. And that is why all of the, requests and the warnings and the appeals started to come in from the government side.
Yeah, absolutely. And good morning. And, we're waking up to another day of, for people having to adapt. I think the basic reason why this was done in a phased manner, and as you said, more hikes may also come in the coming weeks. But it has to be done in a phased manner, because as an economist or as, a policymaker, you have to see people's reaction to it. You have to see, is the industry being able to absorb the hike? At what level is the industry being able to absorb the hike? And I think this is why the plan was always and continues to be to keep on making the hikes in a phased manner, because then that has a lower shock on inflation. But the shock on inflation will surely come, and we've already seen that the wholesale price inflation has increased to 8%. Next month, we'll learn how much the consumer price inflation.
Of course, when it comes to the inflation, how does it look like as far as the month of April and May? Well, that will be coming, in the months ahead. But this seems to be, Mitali, thank you very much for your point of view. Whether to do it imminently or to hold the prices for longer, and whether to announce a steep hike in one go or to adapt a staggered approach. Now, it seems that a staggered approach is something that has been chosen by the government. Let's in the meantime also talk about the impact of war and the declining of the rupee, and one of the weakening that points that we are now looking at as far as when it comes to the rupee against the dollar is also concerned. And this is where it stood before the war 91.1, that was per dollar as far as the rupee amount is concerned, and now the weakest that we are now looking against the dollar. It now amounts to almost rupees 96, and this is as far as gold is now concerned. 24 carats, around 1,62,000 per 10 grams before the war. And as far as when it comes to the effect that is now being seen, why the Prime Minister has been asking and appealing people to at least refrain from buying gold for a year when it comes to saving, when it comes to your reserves, your forex is concerned. So this is going to be a one-shot steep price hike. That is something that may not be politically palatable also for the government. We've seen the kind of reactions that came in from the opposition side as well. They have been now terming and linking it with elections. They have been saying that this was evident and this imminent, and this is about to happen. And of course, when it comes to silver prices as well, that has also been impacted. But this seems to be the very contention that the government has now taken up as far as the price hike is now concerned. And when we take a look as far as crude oil prices, we are now looking at, of course, when it comes to $110, $111 per barrel, and that seems to be the biggest impact so far that we are looking how the fuel prices here in India have been increased the second time in the last 4 days, but the second time that we're also looking at in the last 4 years. Dave is also connected with us. So Dave, early morning commuters there last Friday, they weren't very happy. However, they were anticipating that the fuel price hike would happen, and this has now happened again.
Well, yes, absolutely. Given the fact that this is the second price rise within less than a week, on Friday, the prices of petrol and diesel in metro cities and Delhi NCR were hiked up by 3 rupees a litre, and now nearly a rupee in Delhi. If we speak, it's almost touching 99 rupees per litre, and diesel touches about 92. In fact, in certain cities like Mumbai, it has also crossed the 100 mark for petrol and diesel both. While the commuters have made peace with the fact that the price rise was imminent and something that could, in wake of the current global oil and energy crisis, there was nothing much that could have been done, because we're also anticipating a lot of fuel to come via the ships that have been stuck in the Strait of Hormuz or are still clearing. But in fact, the people have somewhere also accepted the fact that this was going to happen and nothing much could be done about it. So behind me you can see, however, this is the private petrol pump HMEL, yet people are still coming. They don't mind paying the high prices because it is an essential item. It is something that they need and cannot function without. So that is the scenario at this point in time. However, as far as the other government companies are concerned, Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum, Hindustan Petroleum, they have also affected the price rise and the hike. So somewhere a lot of opposition parties have also been saying from the start that this government, only because these are poll-bound states, is very consciously taking care to not increase the rates, but the people must brace for a price rise. And eventually that did happen. But of course, as you know, that not just India, the world is also facing a global fuel and energy crisis.
I think, Dave, in the meantime, try to get some reactions as the petrol pumps. Some of them would be opening up early this morning, so they would be having a first-hand reaction coming in from the commuters there. Some of them are open 24/7. But Mr. Dua, when it comes to the other steps that the government has taken, especially when it comes to doubling the effective tax paid on import of gold and silver, that has now also significantly gone up. Do you believe that these changes have been made when it comes to the cascading effect that now we are looking at, as far as when it comes to the effect on gold prices, on silver prices, and of course when it comes to saving up on the forex?
I think the major consideration was what you stated towards the end. That is, we have a huge trade deficit. Exports are not being very elastic. And for part of the reason being the tariffs of the US, which still subsist, and the others being supply chain disruptions, partly because of the war and partly because of the kind of demand itself in certain parts of the world coming down because of inflation without the corresponding increase in incomes. Having said that, the government had to make a choice on which is the least kind of damaging aspect which they could deal with without affecting the current growth as well as the immediate growth within the immediate kind of horizon. next couple of years or so. So the gold, which is in some ways, you would agree with me, is an inert item. People were holding it because it was in anticipation of its price increasing. Price was increasing faster than the stock exchange. The equity, it was also increasing faster than faster than real estate in many parts of the country. So it was not adding to the production capacity of the country, be it manufacturing services. It was just being used either as a collateral to borrow money or to just wait and see, to be used for social purposes, or to make a fast buck whenever the money, whenever it increases. So the government had to cut its trade deficits, and I would think this was the one measure which certainly has caused anxiety amongst the people in the gems and jewelry industry, because their exports will further get hit if the gold prices go up. But it was expected, and I think we must learn to live with it.
All right, sir, because, it is something that was being anticipated. However, it is still being said when it comes to the notifications that have been issued by the government of India, because fuel retailers will still have to face a gap, what is being said, around 15 to 20 rupees per litre on fuel sale. And this is now coming across, as far as the gap is concerned, to cover up or to plug on those gaps. Are there more staggered approaches that would be taken up by the government when it comes to more smaller fuel hikes in the near future? That remains to be seen, because it is being said that it was the first one that happened on Friday, but definitely not the last. Coming back to you, Dev, have you managed to find some people there in the morning, possibly who have come in to fill their tanks of their vehicles? What are we now looking at as far as the reactions are concerned?
Well, yes, give me a few seconds. सर, एक हफ्ते के अंदर ये तकरीबन 4 दिन के अंदर 4 रुपए से ये दूसरा प्राइस हाइक है. इतना महंगा पड़ रहा है पेट्रोल और डीजल. क्या कहना चाहेंगे?
इतना तो होना नहीं चाहिए, पर अभी फिलहाल हमें देश का भी सोचना है, अपने बारे में भी सोचना है. तो ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा तो ऐसे मेट्रो जहाँ ज़रूरत है वही बाइक या गाड़ी का हम इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं. बाकी फ़िलहाल जहाँ मेट्रो नहीं पहुँच पा रही, जहाँ नहीं जा पा रहे हैं मेट्रो से, तो वहाँ हम बाइक का थोड़ा बहुत बचाव.
तो कहीं ना कहीं आप मोदी जी की बात से सहमत है कि पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट यूज़ करें, ईंधन का कम इस्तेमाल करें?
फिलहाल अगर नहीं मिल पा रहा तो थोड़ा बहुत हमें सपोर्ट करना चाहिए, अपने देश का भी और मोदी जी की भी.
मेरा आखिरी सवाल आपसे रहेगा कि लोगों की मजबूरी है इतना महंगा तेल खरीदना?
मजबूरी तो है ही. अगर जहाँ जो ज़रूरत है, जिसको जॉब करनी, जिसे जॉब पैसे, अब हर दिनचर्या में हमें पैसे की ज़रूरत पड़ेगी हमें, तो उसके लिए जॉब करना ही पड़ेगा. और जॉब करना है तो जहाँ हमारे मेट्रो नहीं पहुँच पा रही, जहाँ ई रिक्शा भी जहाँ अवेलेबल नहीं हो पाते, नाइट ड्यूटी है जिसकी, वहाँ गाड़ी से जाना ही पड़ेगा, वहाँ हमें खरीदना ही पड़ता है.
धन्यवाद बात करने के लिए. So this was one gentleman saying that where we are required to take vehicles, we should take vehicles, but where it's possible to use public transport to reach places, we should also do that in line with the PM's vision and his appeal that he had made a few days back. We will also try and speak to another person. भैया क्या कहना चाहेंगे? 4 रुपए से फिर से बढ़ा दिया है एक हफ्ते के अंदर, ये दूसरी बार भाव बढ़ाया है सरकार ने.
सर, हम लोगों को तो बहुत ज़्यादा दिक्कत हो रही है सर. हमारी जो कंपनी है वो तो रेट बढ़ा नहीं रही है. हम लोगों पे तो कमाना, खर्चा निकालना बहुत मुश्किल है. खर्चा भी नहीं निकल पा रहा है सर. हम लोग क्या करें? मजबूर.
जो कमा रहे उतना तो तेल में ही चले जा रहा है.
और क्या सर, जितना कमा रहा हूँ सारा गाड़ी और गाड़ी का मेंटेनेंस और पेट्रोल सब इसीलिए होता है सर. क्या करें? मजबूरी, हम किससे कहें? हमारी कोई सुनने वाला ही नहीं सर. हम लोग परेशानी में क्या कर सकते हैं?
This was this one such troubled gentleman. He is also a Swiggy Instamart delivery boy. He said that whatever his earnings are, nearly half or more than half go into the maintenance of the vehicle and refueling. So he said that irrespective of whether the government increases or not, parallelly his company and his employer also should account for that factor and pay them accordingly. But that is not happening at this point in time, at this moment, which is why he is like, he said, majboori hai. So people are compelled rather to fill fuel at whatever prices the government is offering, and especially these OMCs, the oil and marketing companies. So this is what you are seeing here. These are several office goers who have come at this HMEL petrol pump, and with no choice.
We'll try and get more reactions, Dave, because we're still expecting. It is early in the morning where we are looking at this news once again coming in of the fuel price hike. But Mr. Dua, do you believe that India is staring at a double squeeze? I mean, as far as Middle East oil flows are still unstable, Russian oil also now carries sanctions risk again. So what are we now looking at as far as the India point of view?
I think our main concern should be that the quantity of oil which comes into India from whichever sources it might be, as the other day, the Petroleum and Natural Gas Minister was at pains to say that we are buying oil and gas from 40 countries now. They may be distant, they may be small quantities, but we have diversified. That was a message which he wanted to put across. I think this is better than what we are seeing in the neighborhood. Do you know that in Bangladesh, people queue up for whole night only to get 2 liters of petrol, which is being given at the retail stores, at the pumps. Just 2 liters. In India, we've not put any quantitative restriction. There are restrictions even in Indonesia. I happen to be talking today from Singapore, so I'm a little bit closer to Indonesia and get to know what's happening. That the OPEC member, Indonesia, produces a lot of petrol, yet the needed oil from outside. It's trying to preserve its assets, also reserves, but it has had to put quantitative restrictions. We are lucky that we haven't got down to that stage. We've been able to diversify and get oil from somewhere or the other. And I'm quite sure that seeing the situation and the fact that the President Trump didn't have a very good visit to China, last week's visit, he is bound to relent and not go ahead with continuing to sanction Russian oil. He would let it flow. The sanctions are actually, as of today, not there. But they could be there, that's the threat. But I'm sure the wisdom will prevail. And
but Mr. Dua, when we speak of instability, especially what's happening in the Middle East, because that is beyond our control, but when we speak of, could it actually push India's oil import bill sharply higher? Because if oil prices remain elevated, then the pressure eventually reaches the consumers. So what is that we're looking at? Hike in petrol prices, hike in diesel prices, hike in LPG cylinders, commercial cylinders, airfares, logistic costs, food, inflation, everything starts moving up together.
Absolutely, you're right. On that, there can be no two opinions. If the fuel prices go up, be it for household industries or transportation, it will reflect across the economy. And that is where the pressure has to be put by the global community on President Trump as that, look, you have made your point vis-a-vis Iran. Please make sure that now that China has given hints that it would also like the Strait of Hormuz to be open. The communique didn't say that, so but that the two presidents did discuss it. I would think that Hormuz would get open. It will be to the advantage of Iran, the goodwill which it needs of the rest of the world, including the oil buyers like India, would come only if it acts very quickly and does not persist with, I would say, questionable right over the strait, because it is outside the international waters, which Iran can control. Those were some 12 nautical miles. This is well beyond it.
Right, sir.
It is somewhere or the other, it could get into further trouble if it continues to persist.
Absolutely. Prolonged disruption is something that will bother people, especially when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. We're still not looking at any reopening or the blockade being removed. However, when it comes to a second round of military conflict is concerned, that seems unlikely for now. But the faster the peace proposal comes in place, the better it will be for the world, because now we are looking at when it comes to the disruption in the Strait of Hormuz combined with tighter Russian sanctions could actually force countries to think beyond normal market responses. Thank you very much, Mr. Dua, for joining us here on the broadcast. And of course, this is now another hike, a nominal one, not even amounting to a complete rupee. However, it will add to the burden of the common man, because this is India's challenge. That is not just about buying oil anymore. It is more about buying oil safely, cheaply, and also without triggering any geopolitical consequences. We're going to head into a very short break. This is going to be the big story right here on Times Now.